Good afternoon, everyone. It's midday. Welcome to this session of Geometry, Cosmology, Spirituality. Now, we're going to carry on the theme of the pentagram and the planet Venus as the morning star. I talked about the pentagram and the octagram in the last session 2 weeks ago. Now, I'll get straight down to the slides, and I've got a rather beautiful one to begin with. Now, this beautiful image by Bernardo Daddi, I put as the frontispiece on chapter 1 of my book, The Cosmos in Stone, because I think it's such a wonderful image, especially in that relationship between the mother and child. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the symbolism associated with the Virgin Mary in this session, the Mother of God, and her association with the morning star, the planet Venus, rising in the east. Star, mother of the sun, nurse of thine own father. These are the words of a troubadour from the 13th century, Père de Corbiac. Now, as you can see from what he's saying, the star, the mother of the sun, this is a description of planet Venus as the morning star, because when Venus rises in the east, it's just before the sun rises. And so this is part of her symbolism as the one who precedes Christ. Now, the symbolism also is to do with the fact that because she is illuminated in the sky, she reflects the light of Christ down to us. So from our perspective, the sun is still below the horizon, and so we can't see the sun. But she, in her elevated position, can see the sun, and she reflects the light of the sun down to us. Now, it is just about 11 days now before the Feast of the Assumption, which is about the Virgin Mary's elevation and assumption into heaven. Now, here is an image of planet Venus as the morning star. So, as I mentioned, before the sun rises, that's when Venus is visible. So, either as the morning star rising in the east or as the evening star setting in the west. So, as long as the sun is below the horizon, just around twilight, I talked about this a bit in relation to the symbolism of the cross as well, and the sun and the moon on either side of the cross. That was in one of my sessions about the symbolism of the serpentine symbolism in relation to the cross. So with Venus rising in the east, we have this promise of light, of the ascension of light, and this emergence of light into the world. Now, another association with the planet Venus, the morning star, is the rose. And this, again, is another symbol of the Virgin Mary. Now, the most direct connection of these symbolisms are in the rosary beads. The rosary beads here, as you can see, if you look closely, there are 5 sort of separate beads in between sets of 10. So you have this 5-fold symmetry, which is also present in the movement of the planet Venus. But of course, it's also present in the symmetry of the wild rose, which is the rose which tends to be depicted in the medieval Christian iconography. So as you can see, the 5 sepals of the rose naturally will point towards the 5 mystery beads that are on that chain of beads. Now, the other thing which brings it into the realms of the planet Venus is that the shape of the rosary beads themselves are the same as the planetary glyph symbol of Venus, which of course is also used as a symbol of the female gender. So you have this collection of symbols all relating to the number 5, to the pentagram. Now, another example of this, which I'm going to show, is how it's also present in the Lady Chapel, a chapel dedicated to the Virgin Mary, up at the east end of the cathedral here in the city of Wells. Now, here is a 15th century image of the rosary beads and a rose. So similar to what I was just showing you with my own image there. So you can see how the 5 sepals of the rose here, they naturally touch these 5 gold circles, and they are the mystery beads of a set of rosary beads. And then these white dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 in between each one of those gold dots. They're the 5 decades, which are the 5 sets of 10 beads. So this symbolism of fiveness and the rose and Venus is something you find in the medieval church within images such as this one. Now, I'll show again what I showed a couple of weeks ago, just to give us the context for what we're about to draw. So the Venus pentagram works in such a way whereby every conjunction of Earth, Venus, and then the Sun, obviously in the middle, every conjunction gives the 5 points of a pentagram star as they occur. And there's 1.6 years, or 584 days, between each one of these conjunctions, and that makes an 8-year cycle. Now, as well as the pentagram, you also have the Venus octagram as well. So every year when Earth returns back to the starting point, Earth being the blue dot, we look at where Venus is and mark her new position. So after 1 year, Earth is back to the starting point, but Venus is now moved to where you see the green dot. And each year, we mark where Venus is by drawing another line from the previous position, and we end up getting the octagram star. So I talked about this and showed this 2 weeks ago as well, but it's going to be useful just as a reminder for the chapel in Wells Cathedral, because it consists of both of these symmetries. Now, I also showed this and how there's this likeness between the circles at the centers of those stars, the circle that contains the pentagon in the pentagram star, and the circle that is contained by the octagon at the center of the octagram star. Now, here is the chapel in question. Its east end is actually pentagonal in the ground plan, and that's these 3 walls here. If you took their position within the ground plan, they create 3 edges of a pentagon, and I'll show you that with an actual image of the ground plan. So they're the 3 walls that I was just pointing out. So as you can see, they form this polygonal shape, and it is actually a pentagon. Now, if we complete that into a pentagram star and we put in the various lines that come out of the star, they give us the main axes of the central axis of the cathedral, the central axes of the side aisles, and the central axes of those 2 transept chapels that are sort of sticking out from the main body of the building. Now, if we can imagine that the pentagram is contained within a circle, as it inevitably is, and the center of the circle is, of course, at the center of the star. Now, what we're going to do next is to draw another circle the same size from the bottom corner. So from this point here. Right, in goes the circle. And then if you look up to the top right, there's an octagram star, and that's the orientation with which the star is going to go into that circle. Now, the thing I want to point out is that this whole area here is the Lady Chapel. So the pentagon is only actually covering the east end of the chapel, whereas you have a whole of an area here, which, as you can probably see, is quite octagonal. So in goes this complete star. Now, if you look back at the blue star on the top right-hand corner, I'm going to reduce it back to an octagon, and then we can do the same thing on the chapel area, just have the octagon, and then you can see very clearly how these 2 shapes, these 2 symmetries of the planet Venus are both there in this Lady Chapel, which is up at the east end of the cathedral, a chapel dedicated to the Stella Matutina, which means morning star. That's one of the titles of the Virgin Mary. Now, this is what's going on with the actual drawing of it. So you can see how the 2 stars are at the side, and they're staggered slightly, so they're on slightly different levels, so that you can get that pentagon circle and octagon circle to eventually overlap in a vesica formation. That's the name where you have 2 circles overlapping, whereby the circumference of each is going through the center of the other. So let's look closely at that one. That's what you end up with. And if you take the circles out, then you just have those 2 polygons, and that is essentially what governs the geometry of that particular chapel at the east end of Wells Cathedral. So what I'm going to get us to do is to draw these 2 polygons. We'll actually draw the 2 polygon stars, and then we'll highlight the 2 shapes to actually give ourselves the shape of that chapel. So let's get drawing. Right, I shall switch my camera on to say hello. Hello, and welcome everyone. Good to see all of you.
Hello, Tom.
I shall spotlight myself for everyone. This is one of the more reasonable timed sessions I'm doing. I'm going to be doing a couple in the middle of the night. Not the next one, but the two after that. I think session 23 and 24 will be around 2 or 3 in the morning. So that'll be either for those abroad or those who are sleepless. And then the final one I'm going to do, session 25 on October the 2nd, that will be at a reasonable time. I think it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, or a reasonable time for this time zone anyway. Right, okay, I shall get my drawing camera on. New moon coming up, as you may be aware, just in a few minutes. Yeah, a good time for planting things, apparently, at the new moon. It's what's said in biodynamic gardening, the beginning of the rise upwards towards the full moon. Right, now, as you can see, I've got a piece of A4 paper. I've just got this larger white paper in the background because it has an effect on the light setting on my camera. Right, so we're going to, first of all, divide a circle into 5. So what I'm going to get us to do is have it slightly further up the page. So if you can take your ruler, and I'm going to measure 5 inches down from the top of this piece of A4 paper and make a little mark here and then make an equivalent mark here so that I can then draw a horizontal line across the page. So that's 5 inches down, and this one's 5 inches down. No, I only just made it home for this session. I was just carrying the cross in the cathedral and I got back about 3 minutes to midday. So I don't know if I sounded out of breath when I started. Right, the radial measurement that we want to use is 3 inches. So take 3 inches onto your compasses. There is something particularly cosmological about the design of the cathedral here in Wells. Now, I don't know exactly why. There are some elements in some of the other cathedrals, but it's particularly cosmological here. And this might be something to do with Adelard of Bath, who's quite an interesting character who's worth looking up. He was a very significant translator of Arabic manuscripts, Arabic knowledge on cosmology, philosophy, geometry. He was the first person who translated Euclid's geometry books from Arabic into Latin back in the 12th century. And he did it in the Diocese of Bath and Wells. So his presence, because he was very much also into talismanic magic, he translated various um, treatises on that as well. So it's quite possible that this is why there's such a cosmological aspect to the design of Wells Cathedral, because he was very local. Right, 3 inches, and I'm going to then go into the middle point of this line. So as you can see, I'm placing the point of the compasses into the eastern point of the circle, and I'm going to make a mark on the upper semicircle and one on the lower semicircle. And then I'm going to do the equivalent thing from the other side, from the western points. Now, this association of the Virgin Mary with the number 5, it only seems to come up around about the 12th, 13th century, something like that. So it's not in earlier Christianity, and it's not in the Orthodox Church at all. It's only actually in the Roman Catholic Church. So I feel it's something that was possibly brought back from the era of the Crusades, and possibly something to do with a Middle Eastern talisman, which is very much associated with the number 5, which is known as, well, Muslims call it the Hand of Fatima, Christians call it the Hand of Mariam, as in the Virgin Mary, and Jews call it the Hand of Miriam. And it's a hand. It's like an image of a hand, and it's called a khamsa, which is the Arabic word for 5. Right, as you can see, I've used these 2 points to give myself these 2 lines to form this cross. Now, we're too close to the top of the paper to be able to do that up at the top, so we're going to need to reduce the measurement on the compasses. So I'm going to make it a bit smaller so that we can then fit a cross on directly above, like so. Another association of the number 5 with the Virgin Mary is the pentagram on the shield of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And there's a pentagram on the front of his shield and an image of the Virgin Mary on the inner side of the shield. In fact, the course I'm going to be teaching at Michaelmas will go into that storyline, as well as what's known as the Testament of Solomon, which features the pentagram. Right, now we've got this cross, and this cross we can put in fact, actually, let's just put in, actually, no, we will put in the whole line, come to think of it. Right, now the next thing that we're going to do, we need to line our ruler up with these 2 points here. I'm only actually going to put in a very small amount of the axis between these 2 points, just where it crosses the horizontal line. So very often we put in the whole of this line, but it's not necessary for what we're doing here. Now we'll do the equivalent thing also between these 2 points as well. Right, as you can see, I have set my compasses so that I can draw a circle that goes through the center of the big circle and through that eastern point of the circumference. Now that should be possible if that line there has been drawn accurately, because that line should be exactly halfway between here and here. If you find that when you try and set your compasses, you don't hit this point and this point, feel free to move the point of your compasses ever so slightly around this mark you've made if you need to. We all have on days and off days with accuracy. Now the other one, of course, will go in too. Yes, continuing on from what I was saying about the Hand of Mariam, the Hand of Fatima, it is a symbol associated with Inanna, the Sumerian Venus. So again, it's a Venusian symbol. And this is all within the realms of medieval Christian thought, because the only part of astrology that the medieval church and various other religious traditions weren't keen on was fortune telling, because then people could say, it's all in the stars. I don't need to make any effort in life because it's all in the stars and whatever happens, happens. So it was an issue of free will. That was why it wasn't so approved of in various traditions. Right, as you can see, I'm drawing a line from the bottom point of the circle through that center to the far side of this circle here, and another one, same. Right, the next thing to do, as you'll possibly be aware if you're used to dividing a circle into 5 and 10, is to open the compasses up so that you have this measurement. And from here to here is 1/5 of the circle. So that would be the baseline of a pentagon, or the 2 feet of the pentagram star. Now to get the other points, because obviously we've got the top point already, so we just need 2 more points to get our full 5, and that's this one here. One line like this, and one like this. And so this is 5 points. Now we need to do pinprick holes through these 5 points so that we can draw on the opposite side of the paper. Now I realize I didn't say to people, make sure the other side of your paper is blank. So if you have got something on the other side of your paper, you can get another sheet of A4 and put it directly below this one, line them up at the corners, obviously, and then you can put pinprick holes through to another piece of paper. But hopefully you can stay on this piece of paper here. Right, you don't need to do what I'm about to do here. I mean, you can if you want, but I'm actually marking my 5 pinprick holes so that you can see them, so that you can see how I'm about to interact with them. But you don't need to do this. If you can just see the pinprick holes yourself, then that's fine. Now we're going to draw the pentagram star straight onto this. You'll remember if you came to the last session that we actually completely overlapped the pentagram and the octagram to see that circle at the center and how the circle interacted with the 2 different stars. This time we're going to stagger the 2 stars so that they create the shape of the Lady Chapel. So the 5-pointed star, as you may be aware, you miss 1 point each time. So from here miss this one, go to this one. You're drawing a diagonal every time. You can't really go wrong because there's only wherever you draw a diagonal, it will be useful for creating this star. Now, this is that movement of the planet Venus. You can sort of see this shape developing both from a geocentric and a heliocentric perspective, interestingly. So you don't need modern technology to be aware of it. It's something that one can see without satellites, etc. Now, while I'm about this, I'm going to actually shade in that pentagon at the center, because this will just be useful for showing us the shape of the Lady Chapel once we draw in the other star. So shade in with a color or with leads, whatever you want to do. Oh, I have some good news about the website. My website is pretty much done now, so it's might even be live now, in fact, but I'm not sure. It might be live in a day or two. tomburygeometry.com. So if you were to look at it and it said 404 not found, that just means it hasn't gone live yet. It's and that's what will become my teaching platform. And I'll carry on putting these sessions onto YouTube that I'm doing at the moment. I'll be teaching online courses. As I mentioned last time, I'm going to do one about John Michel's mandalas. That'll be the first one I'll do, beginning in October. Right, having shaded that, I'm now going to turn my paper back over and divide another circle into 8. Right, so the first thing that we need to do is to return the radial measurement of the compasses to the measurement of that circle that we started off with, because obviously these two stars, they both need to be generated from the same size of circle. Now, as you can see, I'm checking in all different directions because sometimes, we don't always go back into the same position with the hole at the center. So I check in sort of 4 different areas of the circumference to make sure that the point is going back into the center. Now, this is only to re-establish the radial measurement. The place that we're going to actually draw from is a bit lower down, from here. So place the point of your compasses there with your re-established radial measurement. Now, having done that, we now need to reduce the radial measurement to this. So put the point or the pencil in the center of like so. Now this is the circle at the center of the larger. So this is that circle that has the octagon going around it. So in fact, the relationship of this circle to this circle is the same as the distance of the orbital circle of Mercury to the orbital circle of Earth. Now, that's obviously something I've just pulled out of fresh air there. If you look at the previous session to this one, session 20, I talk about that. I sort of describe, because also another way of saying it is that if that is the size of planet Mercury, that is the size of planet Earth. But yes, if you look at the previous session, you'll get the details on that one. Right, so with the radius of that smaller circle that we've just drawn, I'm now going to go down to this point here. And then I'm going to go to the top, draw that same circle. And finally, using this point here and the equivalent point there, I'm going to place the point of my compasses like that and just make a mark like this. And then the equivalent thing here as well. So that's where I place the point of the compasses to make these marks here with the radius from these smaller circles that we've been drawing. Right, so now I've done that, I'm going to actually use those positions to draw two more circles. Now you may find that these circles go off the page very slightly. Don't worry, that's no problem. We actually don't need that part where they go off the page. Right, so it's as simple as this. We just need to draw lines that tangent these two, I suppose you could say, axes of circles. Now we already have this line that's doing that. So this one is already done. Let's perhaps put the other line in. So as you can see, I'm just going to tangent the bottom of those three circles like so. Tangent, of course, means it's from tangible to touch. And I'm going to do similar parallels, tangenting. Now, the length of these lines, what we actually need with these lines is where they cross this lower circle here, which is the circle that we're working on. So we only need our lines to actually cross that circumference. So as you can see here, that's enough because we've got that point there. And coming down to here, we've got that point there. Right, now you should hopefully find that where these lines that we've just drawn, where they cross the circumference of this big circle is just ever so slightly different to the circumference of these smaller circles here. So the circumference point is there, whereas a tiny bit away from it is the point we're looking for. So what we're now going to do, I'm going to mark those points, and we're going to put 8 pinprick holes through to the other side. Now, don't worry if these two marks are the same. I mean, it'll be such a small difference. I wouldn't worry, but technically they should be ever so slightly different. Right, and I can see there's various other marks I've made on here that might be distracting you. So I'm gonna perhaps make these stand out a bit. So I'll put these little marks around the 8 points that I'm wanting you to have in your focus here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now put pinprick holes through those 8 points. If you did have to use another piece of paper when you put the pinprick holes through for the pentagram a bit earlier on, because you already had something on this side, make sure that you line your paper up very accurately so that it goes with what we did with the pentagram. So again, you don't need to do what I'm doing here. I'm highlighting my 8 pinprick holes so that you can see how I interact with them. So otherwise you might just be looking at a blank space. So there's my octagon. Of course, we're going to draw an octagram star. Now, when you overlap these two stars and sort of stagger them, it does jar with the eye a bit. But of course, this is one of the reasons why I'm highlighting the pentagon and the octagon, just so that it makes them stand out, because obviously that's what's actually being used by the designer in this instance. I'll let you get those 2 verticals and 2 horizontals in. Now I'm going to turn my paper this way, just because it makes drawing a bit more straightforward. Now I'm going to, with my orientation of paper like this, I'm going to sort of effectively draw 2 more verticals. But as you can see, it's well, they're going to end up as diagonals once the paper is turned back the right way. So like I say, if this does start to get a bit jarring to your eyes, just sort of stick to the to what I'm telling you to do. Stick to the instructions and it'll all work out once we get the octagon highlighted. Right, now I'm going to turn the paper the other way, like that. So that I've got these 2 points up here and 2 points down here. And that will be where I draw another pair of parallel lines. And then that will be the octagram star completes. And what I'm going to do is highlight the outline of the octagon just so that you can see what it is that you're working with. Now this symbolism of the Virgin Mary as morning star, I would say it's sort of in line with the Platonic association of Aphrodite Urania and Aphrodite Pandemos. There are two Venuses, and the heavenly Venus would be the one that would be associated with Virgin Mary and also with the risen Christ. Now that is the geometry, and if you just sort of fill in these bits as well, then that gives you the actual outline of the chapel sort of in a more complete way once you get those bits in too. This is the image from my book. And so that's how you get that shape. Now there's a whole load it's chapter 5 and chapter 6 of my book where I go into detail with all of this stuff about Venus and the pentagram. So if you haven't got my book, do think of getting it. And so to finish off, this is a course I've been talking about for the past few weeks. I actually have a flyer for it now, which I'll send out on my mailing lists very soon. So that's an in-person course here in Wales about the symbolism of the pentagram and how it comes into a text called the Testament of Solomon. I've got a short section right near the end of my book called the Pentagram of Solomon and Gawain, and that's some of the subject matter that this course will be going into. If you've done, or if you haven't done any wood parquetry before, as you can see, that's what the image is. That's something that we'll spend a bit of time doing. So we'll make a pentagram on a red shield, which is how Sir Gawain's pentagram looks in the storylines of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We'll do a labyrinth, and we'll look at the way in which the pentagram shows itself in the cathedral here at Wells in the design. And there'll be an event with Rupert Sheldrake at the end of the course, which is for a patronal festival for Michaelmas in a village called Dinder, just outside Wales, which is where the local dragon legend is based. Now, I also mentioned in my last session, this is going to be my first online course, and so that'll be beginning the 4th of October. My final online session in this sequence of 25 will be the 2nd of October. In fact, it's my birthday the next day, funnily enough, and then the 4th of October, I'll start this online course. Very soon, I'll send this out as well, and I'll send out the details about the website, which is going to be ready very soon, if it's not ready now. Now, the final session, or sorry, no, the next session rather, is Monday, the 19th of August, 7 p.m. So a reasonable time if you're in my time zone. Do come along to that. I'm not sure what I'll do with that yet. I might do a bit more about the pentagram. I'll see what comes up at the time. The full moon will no doubt give some inspiration. Right, well, thank you for coming, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed doing that drawing. It's the first time I've ever actually taught that one. It's quite an interesting one to do, because as you sort of saw, it looks a bit jarring, but then once you get the 2 polygons in, that's how you get the shape of the chapel. And it's totally unique. There's no chapel with that shape anywhere that I've ever seen. And it's very Marian and very Venusian. So thank you for coming, and I shall see you at the next session, hopefully, if you're free, or if not, at another session in the future. So thank you and goodbye. See you again.
Bye-bye.
See you, Tom. Thank you. Yes.
Bye.
Bye.